What would you do if the very thing that kept your own baby alive was taken from you, drop by drop, day after day? What if the child you brought into the world, your flesh, your heartbeat, was left to starve while you were forced to feed? Another? This is not a nightmare. This was real. For countless enslaved Black women in America, their milk, their bodies, even their ability to mother were stolen. They became what history calls wet nurses. But behind those two cold words lies a story of pain, power, and resistance. Imagine the scene. The plantation house glows with candlelight at midnight. A baby cries upstairs, white, pale, restless. Down below, in the dark cabin, another baby cries too. Black, frail, hungry. His mother hears him, but she cannot go to him. Her breasts are not his. Her milk belongs to the master's child. She whispers to her baby in the shadows, "Mama loves you. Hold on. Please hold on." But the overseer calls. She must rise. She must walk. She must give. This story is about women who lived under chains, yet found ways to resist. Women whose bodies were exploited, but whose spirits refused to break. Women who carried not just the burden of slavery, but the deepest wound a mother can bear. Tonight, we step into their world. We follow one woman, a composite of many real lives. Through her, you will feel the quiet horror, the hidden courage, the choices no one should ever face. Her name in this story is Sarah. She was 23. She had just given birth to her first child, little Isaiah. But her milk, her very motherhood, would not belong to her. This is Sarah's story. And through her, we uncover the bitter truth about slave wet nurses. The rooster crowed long before the sun appeared. Its cry tore through the still air like a warning. Sarah opened her eyes in the dark cabin. For a moment, she forgot where she was. She only felt the warmth of her baby against her chest, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. But then the sounds returned. The rattling of chains, the shuffle of feet outside, the bark of an overseer already calling men into the fields. The smell of damp earth and smoke crept in through the cracks in the cabin walls. Reality pressed down like a heavy blanket. Sarah held Isaiah closer. He was only 2 weeks old. His skin was soft. His tiny hands clutched at her shirt as if afraid to let go. She whispered in his ear, "Mama's here. Mama's right here." For a brief moment, she allowed herself to dream. She imagined feeding him in peace, watching him grow strong, teaching him to walk. She imagined a life where her milk, her body, belonged only to her child. But on the Carter plantation, dreams were fragile things. That morning, the mistress had summoned Sarah. Word spread quickly through the quarters. The mistress had delivered a son 2 weeks earlier. The baby was pale and weak. The mistress herself, thin and frail, claimed she had no milk. And so the master made his decision. Sarah would become the wet nurse. The words cut through her like a knife. She felt her knees weaken as Ruth, her older sister, tried to steady her. "It's not forever," Ruth whispered. "Maybe only until the mistress recovers." But Sarah saw the truth in the overseer's eyes as he came to collect her. This was not a request. It was an order. She looked down at Isaiah, who whimpered as if sensing the danger. Her breasts ached with fullness, ready to feed him. But now, they were not his. They belonged to another child. The big house smelled of lavender and candle wax. The nursery glowed with sunlight streaming through tall windows. Sarah had never stood in such a room before. White lace curtains, soft blankets, a cradle carved from polished wood. It was a world apart from the rough boards of the slave cabins. And in the cradle lay Thomas, the mistress's baby. His skin was pale, almost translucent, his cries high-pitched and demanding. The mistress hovered nearby, her face pale, her lips pursed. She barely looked at Sarah as she ordered, "Feed him." Sarah obeyed. She sat in the chair, unbuttoned her dress, and lifted the child. He latched on greedily, sucking as though his life depended on her. And in that moment, Sarah felt the ground tilt beneath her. This was the milk Isaiah had waited for. This was the life meant for her own son. Her heart broke in silence. That night, when she returned to the quarters, Isaiah's cries were faint. Ruth had tried to feed him mashed cornmeal mixed with water, but his stomach was too young. too small. His eyes were dull, his lips dry. Sarah wept as she held him. She pressed him to her breast, but the milk was nearly gone. Thomas had drained her. Still, Isaiah suckled, desperate for even the smallest drop. Sarah whispered, "I'm sorry, my baby. Mama's so sorry." Days turned into weeks. The pattern continued. Each morning, Sarah walked to the big house. Each day, she gave her milk to Thomas. Each night, she returned to Isaiah, who grew thinner, weaker. The other women in the quarters saw her pain. They had lived it themselves. Some nodded in silent sympathy. Others told stories of how they had lost their babies because of the same cruel system. One evening, Ruth told her about Dinah, a woman from the neighboring plantation. Dinah had been forced to nurse the master's child too, but she found ways to sneak milk to her own baby, pressing it into a cloth, squeezing a few drops into a wooden spoon. Sometimes, she even risked hiding her child in the big house nursery, when no one was looking, just to feed him quickly. Sarah listened carefully. Her heart stirred with a dangerous thought. Maybe she could do the same. Maybe she could fight back, quietly, secretly. But danger lurked everywhere. Sarah began to notice how the mistress watched her. At first, the mistress seemed relieved that Thomas was growing stronger, but soon jealousy crept in. She noticed how Thomas calmed at Sarah's voice, how his tiny hand clung to her finger. One afternoon, Sarah heard the mistress whisper to the master, "He looks for her, not me. He prefers her arms. He is mine, yet he loves her." The master dismissed it, but Sarah felt the ice in the mistress's words. A slave woman was not supposed to inspire affection, not even from a child. To be noticed too much was dangerous. To be loved too much could be deadly. Isaiah's condition grew worse. His cheeks sank. His cries weakened. Some nights, Sarah feared she would lose him. One night, Ruth pressed her hands over Sarah's and said firmly, "Listen, you cannot let them take everything. You must fight, even if it is drop by drop." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. That night, she prayed harder than ever before. She asked God for courage, for wisdom, for a way to keep her baby alive. The next day, she began her secret rebellion. When Thomas finished nursing, Sarah would gently press her breast, catching the last drops in a rag. She hid the damp cloth in her apron pocket. Later, when she returned to the quarters, she squeezed those precious drops into Isaiah's mouth. It was not enough to fill him, but his eyes opened wider. His tiny tongue licked at the sweetness. He lived another day. Sarah continued. Each day she saved what she could. Each night she smuggled it to Isaiah. She was not alone. Ruth kept watch for her. Old Mama Joe, the healer of the quarters, mixed herbs to help Isaiah's stomach digest the cornmeal better. Even Dinah, when she visited on rare occasions, whispered advice about how to hide milk longer. Together, these women created a web of quiet resistance. They could not storm the big house. They could not fight the master. But they could fight for life in small, hidden ways. Yet the mistress grew more suspicious. One afternoon, she caught Sarah pressing her breast after feeding Thomas. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Sarah froze. Her heart raced. "Forgive me, mistress," she whispered. "The milk was heavy. I was only relieving it." The mistress's lips thinned. She said nothing more, but her gaze lingered coldly. That night, Sarah told Ruth, "She suspects me." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Then you must be more careful. But don't stop. Don't you ever stop." The risk was high. The punishment for disobedience could be brutal. But Sarah no longer thought of herself. She thought only of Isaiah. She remembered her mother's words, spoken long ago. "They can chain your body, but your love is free. Use it, child. Use it wisely." And so Sarah chose. Her place was not only in the nursery, her place was with her son, even if it meant defiance. Every drop of milk she saved became an act of rebellion. Every whisper to Isaiah became a promise. "I will not let them take you from me, not all of you." Part 1 ends here. Sarah's secret plan begins. The stakes are set. The mistress grows suspicious, and the quiet network of enslaved women emerges around her. The summer heat pressed heavy on the Carter plantation. The air shimmered above the fields, and even in the nursery, the air felt thick and stifling. Sarah wiped sweat from her brow as she rocked Thomas, the mistress's baby, in her arms. His pale face was flushed, his breath shallow, but all Sarah could think of was Isaiah. Was he breathing? Was he crying? Was he still alive? Every moment in the big house stretched like an eternity. Sarah had perfected her secret ritual. After Thomas nursed, she pressed her breast carefully, catching what she could. She wrapped the cloth and tucked it deep into her apron. By now, her hands moved with practiced speed, but one afternoon, as she slipped the cloth into her pocket, the nursery door creaked open. The mistress stood there. Sarah's heart froze. The mistress's eyes darted to Sarah's apron. "What are you hiding?" Sarah forced a smile. "Only a rag, mistress, to clean the baby's mouth." She lifted it quickly, dabbing at Thomas's chin as if to prove it. The mistress's eyes narrowed. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then she turned away, muttering, "You always seem too careful with him." "Too close." Sarah exhaled only after the door shut. Her knees trembled. She had barely escaped. That night, she confided in Ruth, "She almost caught me. One wrong step, and it's over." Ruth touched her arm. "You can't stop now. Isaiah is stronger than before. He opens his eyes more, Sarah. He fights because you fight." Sarah nodded, though fear gnawed at her. Around the fire that night, the women sang low songs. At first the songs sounded like lullabies, soothing the children to sleep. But Sarah had begun to notice the hidden meanings. The words carried warnings, lessons, even maps. One line repeated, steal away home." It was a signal, Ruth whispered, used by those planning escape. But it was also a reminder. Freedom was not only running north. Sometimes freedom was hidden in small acts, in stolen moments, in drops of milk saved from the master's gaze. The mistress's jealousy deepened with each passing week. One morning, Sarah was rocking Thomas when the mistress entered quietly. She stood in the corner, watching. Thomas nuzzled against Sarah, clutching her dress with his small fingers. The mistress's eyes filled with something dark. "He clings to you as if you were his own mother," she said coldly. Sarah lowered her head. "He is your son, mistress. Yet, he cries when I hold him. He smiles for you." The mistress's voice trembled. "Even my child is taken from me." Sarah dared not answer. But in her heart she thought, "And mine is taken from me too." Back in the quarters, Isaiah's condition wavered. Some nights, he seemed stronger. He swallowed the milk Sarah brought, his eyes shining faintly in the firelight. Other nights, he lay limp, his breath shallow, as if he were slipping away. One evening, Mama Jo placed her hands on Isaiah's chest, humming softly. She brewed a tea of bitter herbs, dipping her fingers in and brushing Isaiah's lips. "This will give him strength," she whispered. Sarah knelt beside her baby, praying silently. Every cough, every whimper felt like a knife in her heart. She made a vow that night. "If I must choose between their child and mine, I will choose mine." The following week, the danger escalated. Sarah was in the nursery, nursing Thomas, when the mistress suddenly burst in. "You've been here too long," she snapped. "Why does he take so much time with you?" Before Sarah could answer, the mistress strode forward and yanked Thomas from her arms. The baby began to cry, wailing loudly. "See? He doesn't need you," the mistress cried, rocking him awkwardly. But the louder she shushed, the harder Thomas screamed. His tiny face turned red with effort. Desperate, the mistress shoved him back at Sarah. "Take him! Quiet him before his father hears." Sarah held Thomas close, humming softly, her body trembling. Within moments, he calmed against her breast. The mistress's face twisted with rage and shame. She stormed out without a word. Sarah knew then. She was walking a razor's edge. The mistress hated her, but she needed her. That tension could snap at any moment. In the quarters, Sarah found comfort in the circle of women. They spoke in whispers, careful not to be overheard. Dinah shared. More tricks. "Press the milk into a small gourd," she said. "Hide it under the straw mat. No one will think to look there." Ruth added, "When the work bell rings and all eyes are turned to the fields, slip away. Just for a moment. Enough to feed him." The women guarded Sarah's secret as if it were their own. They understood that her fight was their fight. Even the men, though cautious, offered help. One slipped her a hollow reed, whispering, "Use this to give him the milk easier. like a straw. In a world where everything was taken, these small acts of solidarity became lifelines. Still, fear stalked Sarah's nights. One evening, she dreamed that Isaiah was crying, but when she reached for him, her arms were empty. Instead, Thomas lay there, pale and demanding. The mistress stood behind her, whispering, "Your child is mine now. Forever mine." Sarah woke with a scream, her chest heaving. Ruth rushed to her side, whispering, "It was only a dream. Only a dream." But Sarah shook her head. "It is not a dream. It is the truth." One rare afternoon, the mistress left. Sarah alone in the nursery. Thomas slept soundly. The house was quiet. Sarah's heart raced. She looked around. No one was watching. Quickly, she lifted her dress and pressed her breast, catching milk into her palm. She reached for the hollow reed the men had given her, hidden in her apron. Then she pulled out a tiny scrap of cloth, a piece of Isaiah's swaddling blanket she had smuggled from the cabin. She touched it to her lips, then dipped the reed into the milk. She whispered, as if Isaiah could hear her across the distance. "Mama is with you, even here, even now." Tears rolled down her cheeks. For those few minutes, she was not just a wet nurse. She was a mother, but not all secrets could stay hidden. One evening, as Sarah returned to the quarters, she passed by the veranda. The master's voice carried through the night. "She spends too much time with the boy," he said. "And my wife grows restless. Perhaps we should switch her with another woman." Sarah froze in the shadows. If they took her away from Thomas, she would lose her chance to save Isaiah. But if they kept her, the mistress's jealousy could turn deadly. It was a trap with no escape. That night, Sarah found Isaiah struggling to breathe. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. His tiny hand barely gripped her finger. "No, no, no," she whispered, rocking him desperately. She pressed the hidden milk to his lips. He swallowed weakly. Mama Jo placed her hands on Sarah's shoulders. "He is still here," she said firmly. "But you must keep fighting, child. He depends on you." Sarah nodded, though tears blurred her vision. She kissed Isaiah's forehead and whispered, "I will not lose you. I cannot." As the weeks dragged on, Sarah began to think beyond milk. She thought of escape. Not for herself. At least not yet. But perhaps there was a way to hide Isaiah where the mistress could never threaten him. She spoke to Ruth in hushed tones. "If I could take him, just for a night into the woods, he might grow stronger." Ruth shook her head. "Too dangerous. The dogs would find you." "But if he stays, he may not live at all," Sarah whispered. The thought grew like a seed. In her mind, the risk was unbearable. But the alternative was worse. The tension built day by day. The mistress's jealousy sharpened. The master's suspicion grew. Isaiah's condition wavered like a candle flame in the wind, and Sarah balanced. On the razor's edge, every heartbeat a gamble. Her secret rebellion had carried her this far. But soon she knew a moment would come when she would have to choose, not only between obedience and defiance, but between life and death. Part 2 ends here. Suspense is at its peak. Sarah is nearly discovered. Isaiah hovers between life and death, and Sarah begins to consider even bolder acts of defiance. The stage is set for the climax. The moon was high, but clouds drifted across it, leaving the plantation in uneasy shadow. The air was thick, heavy, charged with the kind of silence that feels like a warning. Sarah lay in the cabin beside Isaiah, listening to his shallow breaths. Every rise and fall of his chest felt fragile, uncertain. His little body was warm with fever, his lips cracked and dry. She knew he could not last much longer like this. She pressed her ear close to his chest, listening. Each faint breath sounded like it could be his last. "I must act tonight," she thought. "If I wait until morning, it may be too late." Her mind raced. She could not bring Isaiah openly to the big house. Too risky. But maybe, just maybe, she could sneak him in. Just long enough to give him her milk directly. It was madness. If caught, she could lose everything. But when she looked into Isaiah's half-open eyes, she knew there was no choice. She wrapped him in a rough cloth, pressing him against her chest. His body was light, far too light for a baby his age. She kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Hold on, my child. Hold on to me." Into the night, the cabins were quiet. The other women slept, their bodies worn from a day in the fields. Only Ruth stirred, blinking at Sarah in the dark. "Where are you going?" Ruth whispered. Sarah pressed a finger to her lips. "To save him." Ruth's eyes widened, then softened. She nodded once. "Go. I'll keep watch." With that blessing, Sarah stepped into the night. The path to the big house was lined with gravel that crunched underfoot. Sarah moved slowly, carefully, shifting her weight so that every step was as quiet as possible. Her heart pounded louder than her footsteps. A dog barked in the distance. She froze, clutching Isaiah tighter, praying the sound would not draw attention. The dog quieted. Sarah exhaled and moved on. At last, she reached the steps of the big house. The wooden boards creaked under her feet. She winced, holding still until the silence returned. Then she slipped inside through the side door, the one she had used so many mornings before. The house was dim, the air heavy with the scent of lavender and candle wax. She moved through the hallways by memory, her bare feet padding softly on the floorboards. At last she reached the nursery. Thomas slept in his cradle, a faint snore rising and falling. The mistress's rocking chair sat empty in the corner. Sarah lowered herself into the chair, cradling Isaiah. She lifted her dress and pressed him to her breast. He latched weakly, then stronger, his tiny mouth pulling greedily. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she felt the rush of milk flow into him. "Yes, my baby. Drink. Live. Please, live." For a few blessed moments, the world fell away. It was only her child, and the quiet rhythm of his sucking. Then she heard it. The creak of a floorboard. The slow, deliberate sound of footsteps in the hall. Her heart seized. The door handle rattled. Sarah froze, clutching Isaiah to her chest, her breast still exposed. The door opened. The mistress stood there, a candle in her hand. Its flame flickered, casting long shadows across her pale face. Her eyes locked on Sarah, then dropped to Isaiah nursing at her breast. For a moment, the world stopped. The mistress's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her face twisted. Shock, rage, and something else, something darker. Sarah's heart thundered in her ears. She braced for the scream, the call for the master, the end, but the mistress only whispered, low and venomous, "You thief. Even here, you steal from me." Sarah's voice trembled. "Mistress, please. He is my child. He will die without me." The mistress stepped forward, the candlelight trembling in her hand. "And what of my child? Does he not deserve all of you? Is he not worth more than yours?" Sarah held Isaiah tighter. For once, she did not lower her eyes. "Every child deserves his mother." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Bold, dangerous, true. The two women stood locked, in silence. The candle flickered between them, lighting Sarah's defiance and the mistress's fury. At last, the mistress hissed, "Finish quickly, then return him to where he belongs. If the master finds out—" She let the threat hang in the air. Then, she turned sharply, her dress swishing as she left the room, slamming the door behind her. Sarah's whole body trembled. She had survived. For now, Isaiah suckled hungrily, strength returning with each swallow. She stroked his cheek, whispering, "I love you. I love you." But she knew the truth. This could not last. The mistress's silence tonight did not mean safety tomorrow. Sooner or later, the choice would come. Obey and lose Isaiah, or defy and risk everything. She pressed her lips to his forehead, memorizing the feel of him, the scent of his skin. When he finished nursing, she wrapped him gently and slipped back into the night. Every shadow a threat, every sound a danger. At the cabin, Ruth rushed to meet her. "Did he drink?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He drank." Ruth held her close. "Then he will live another day." They laid Isaiah down together. His breaths were deeper now, stronger. His tiny chest rose and fell with new rhythm. Sarah knelt beside him, hands clasped, whispering a prayer of thanks. But even as relief washed over her, fear lingered. The mistress knew the danger had doubled. The battle for Isaiah's life was not over. It had only just begun. Climax ends here. Sarah risks everything, sneaks Isaiah into the nursery, nearly gets caught, and faces down the mistress. She saves Isaiah, at least for now, but the stakes are sharper than ever. The days after that night passed in uneasy quiet. Isaiah grew stronger, little by little. His cheeks filled out, his cries gained power. When Sarah held him, she felt the difference. He gripped her finger tighter, his eyes opened wider. Life had returned, faint but steady. Every drop of milk, every whispered prayer had carried him back from the edge. But peace did not follow. The mistress never spoke of what she saw that night. She never told the master, never raised her voice. But her silence was more dangerous than any shout. Sarah felt her eyes on her constantly, watching, waiting, judging. The mistress no longer left her alone with Thomas. She hovered nearby, as if guarding both child and nurse. Sometimes Sarah caught her staring with a strange mixture of hate and envy. Once the mistress muttered under her breath, "Even in chains, you take what is mine." Sarah lowered her head, but inside, her spirit burned. Nothing of yours was ever mine to take. It was my own child I was saving. Back in the quarters, the women gathered around Sarah with quiet pride. Mama Jo held Isaiah and said, "This child is proof. They may take your freedom, but they cannot take your love." Dinah whispered, "You walked into the lion's mouth and came out with your baby still breathing. That is a victory." Ruth simply hugged her and said, "You did what every mother dreams of doing. You fought and you won." Their words warmed Sarah's heart. For the first time since Isaiah's birth, she felt a small flame of hope. Still, danger never vanished. The mistress could have exposed Sarah at any moment. The master could have ordered punishment if he learned of her defiance. Every step Sarah took was on uncertain ground, but she learned to move with care, to hide her defiance behind obedience. She sang lullabies for Thomas with a steady voice, even while her thoughts lingered on Isaiah. She smiled when the mistress demanded it, bowed her head when the master passed. Yet each night she found ways to smuggle milk to slip Isaiah a little more life. The balance was fragile, but it was enough. Weeks passed, then months. Thomas thrived, plump and spoiled in the big house. But Isaiah too began to thrive. Against all odds, he survived the cruel theft of his mother's milk. Sarah knew the danger had not ended. She knew the mistress's silence was sharp as a knife, ready to cut at any time. But every time Isaiah laughed, every time he opened his bright eyes and reached for her, Sarah felt the strength of her victory. It was not loud. It was not written in books or spoken in courts. It was hidden, fragile, secret. But it was hers. One evening, as she rocked Isaiah by the fire, Sarah whispered to him, "They may own my body. They may claim my hands, my milk, even my days. But you, Isaiah, you are mine. My love belongs to no one else. And as long as I breathe, I will fight for you." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of a promise carved into her soul. And though the night around her was dark, though chains clinked in the distance and overseers barked orders at dawn, Sarah's heart held a fierce light, because she had done the impossible. She had stolen back what slavery tried to take, the right to be a mother. And in that quiet victory, she found a freedom no master could touch. Sarah saves Isaiah through courage and cunning, while living under constant suspicion. Her triumph is fragile, but it is a triumph nonetheless. An act of resistance that outlives the silence around it. History often speaks of battles and leaders, of wars won and lost, but it rarely tells of the secret battles fought in silence, battles waged in cradles and cabins, in the dark corners of plantation houses. The story of enslaved women forced to be wet nurses is one of the bitterest truths of slavery. Their very ability to give life was stolen, redirected to serve the master's household. Their children starved while another child thrived at their breast. And yet, within this cruelty, there was resistance. Women like Sarah, though her name, here is imagined, were real in every corner of the South. They fought not with weapons, but with love. They hid milk. They shared herbs. They whispered prayers. They risked punishment, even death, to give their own babies a chance to live. Their defiance was quiet, but it was powerful. Every drop of milk saved, every heartbeat preserved, was an act of rebellion against a system designed to erase them. When we remember them, we must not see only victims. We must see mothers, warriors in plain cloth, who refuse to let slavery define their love. Their courage echoes through generations. It lives on in every descendant who walks free today. The fields may forget, The masters may vanish, but the love of these women, their courage in the face of impossible choices, remains. And if you listen closely, in the quiet of the night, you may still hear it, a mother's whisper, fierce and unbroken, "You are mine."